Hello everybody, it's me, Player Negative, and today we are talking about the brand new Among Us TV show arriving on Paramount Plus. Now, to be honest, the fact that this even exists at all in 2026 is kind of surprising to me, because honestly, I thought Among Us slowly died out after COVID stopped. But anyways, this series is pretty interesting. I watched all 12 episodes, and I must say, they did a pretty good job on not only following the source material of the games, but also building on the world and characters. And today, I'm going to give a deep dive and explanation on this series and see where it can go moving forward. Without further ado, let's get into it.
Now, before we fully get into the whole ideal of the show and everything that's been going on, I first need to explain what Among Us even is, which at first it might sound stupid because, people recognize the bean-shaped people for quite a long time. And while that is true, not many people know about games since, no one's touched it since 2020, so I feel like a refresher or at least some introduction is needed. God, it's hard to believe it's been 6 years. Anyway, Among Us is essentially a social multiplayer game, friend swap, or whatever you want to call it, where you and 15 other people have to deal with a murder mystery of an alien imposter among us, pun intended. Inspired by the alien horror movie, The Thing, which there are a lot of aspects that went into that movie that were put into Among Us. Anyways, you and multiple players screaming over a voice chat basically spend most of your time doing tasks and trying to fix the ship, getting a task bar full. Meanwhile, the imposter's main goal is to kill everyone within the building without getting detected. If all of the crew members finish their task and get to the full completion bar at the highest level, they win the game. If the imposter manages to kill off every crewmate, they win the game. The game is essentially just a whole thing about who can you trust and who can you not, which would make sense for why the show turned into a whodunit story. But there were also some added updates that the game included and aspects of the show built upon the game that will need to be discussed. So, let's talk about it.
Now, since in-game most of the characters are just customizable and don't really serve any story relevance, the series had to come up with a bunch of pre-made characters in order to fill the role of the main cast, and all of them were voiced pretty well and respectively. I will admit, however, some of the characters did feel a little bit lackluster and were there just to push the plot forward, like White, who, when you think about it for 10 seconds about his backstory and why they chose this color specifically, is kind of a racial stereotype, but all the other characters are handled pretty darn well. Anyways, I will go all into them in a rapid succession. Green is a worm farmer who came from a poor family who is trying to become a captain in order to fulfill his dreams and support his family back at home. Black and Cyan are geologists, even though the paperwork is inaccurate, and one of them is actually a gemologist, but the paperwork doesn't decide to display that. Orange is the HR department. Lime is the Catholic/engineer, which the engineer is one of the roles in the game. Blue is the doctor, red is in charge of being the captain, purple's in charge of security, and the two of them were actually good friends back when they were both unpaid interns. But I'll get into that later. Yellow and brown are the chefs. And so far, that's pretty much it. Again, a lot of these characters die really fast, so don't get too attached to them, but they will. Also, there will be spoilers for those who haven't seen the show, so if you have not seen it, please pause this video and go and watch it. So, without further ado, let's get into what this show did to build upon the original game. So the first thing we should get into is what the show actually gave context to in terms of world building, starting off with why you're even doing this in the first place. All these ships are actually transporting supplies to the company and the corporation known as Mira, which generally your main job is transporting an energy source that resembles coal, but actually is alien eggs that house the very imposters that show up in each round to kill you. And it has been confirmed that every Among Us game you have ever played is actually canon. So all those times you died in this game, yeah, that's canon. Which I guess maybe later down the line they'll explain. Well, anyways. In this scenario, they also explained how people are able to tell the difference between imposters and non-imposters when they're thrown out in space, because in reality you're not going to see floating text all the time. And it's because, number one, they'll just explode because of the vacuum of space, where a normal crewmate won't. Second of all, they also explain how they're able to go into vents, due to the fact that they do not have that one singular bone in their body that every crewmate is known to have. Which I honestly think makes a lot of sense in terms of detail, because creatures like octopuses tend to not be able to deal with problems like that due to their lack of bones and how they're able to squeeze into tight spaces. Second of all, I do think there is potential for this show to continue moving forward. I just think the fact they killed off a good majority of the cast did seem like they're only making this a one-off thing. But if the very concept of coming back to life in this game or respawning is interpreted as reincarnation, I wouldn't think it'd be hard to believe if all the characters suddenly come back to life with no memory of what happened, and then slowly, little by little, some of them realize they're stuck in a loop where one of them becomes the imposter. Which I honestly think would make the most amount of sense, because the ending to this show was one of the most annoying things I did not like. And honestly, I'm gonna say it because no one else will. I don't think Green should have been the imposter at the end of the show. There, I said it. And the reason is pretty simple. The entire show started out with him and the fact that he had aspirations and dreams that were always shoved to the side. He lived on a worm farm, and his entire family sold everything they had to send him up here to live out his dream to try to become a captain, to provide for his family in terms of financial support, which seems a really valid concept of a character. But the fact that they literally just copped out and made him the main villain at the end just made no sense. I think it would have made a lot more sense if White was secretly the imposter and he faked his own death in the first place. Since we know the imposter can take on the appearance of other people, like the shapeshifter role, it would have made more sense that the imposter isn't any of the characters and it's just someone pretending to look like every one of them to change people's suspicions. I honestly think that would have been a way better writing decision, but it just seems like that was all thrown to the wall haphazardly. I also would like to see other roles within the games, because apart from the engineer and the doctor, we didn't get much. There is no captain or security role in the game, and no one's made an update or a mod in order to make an effort to make those real. However, I will compliment the fact that the game did update the map to look very similar to the show, as well as adding a few bits of context so people understand what's going on. I also like how pretty much the animation, while it did have a flat feel similar to a regular show due to the fact it was made by the same animators, it at least was willing to be serious and have a bit of expressions when it came down to some of the characters. But overall, I honestly think the show is just going to be a one-off thing, but I do want it to continue forward. So the only way I would see them doing that is either A, recasting with a whole new load of characters, minus red and purple, or B, having all the characters respawn and completely forget about everything as like a simulation or as a way to feel like they're in the game, like the Matrix or something. I honestly think there could be multiple ways to retcon or fix any of this, but I feel like none of them are ever going to be like good paid off feeling. So to be honest, I think the show is fine as the one-off season that it was. After all, as the old saying is, don't be sad something is gone, just be glad that it happened. Another thing, I think the concept of the imposters looking more like actual aliens or monsters instead of just, oh, it's the same guy with a giant scary mouth or a harpoon-like tongue, was a much smarter idea. Since there are multiple roles of imposters now, I would love to see them incorporate more monstrous designs into the aliens later on down the line. Like the Viper imposter, I would love to see some eldritch snake-like monster. Well, anyways, I'm Player Negative, and I'll be seeing you later.